These folks that are gathering here with me are here to bring you an update on something our leaders have been praying about and discerning. In the spring of 2022, the leaders and staff of our church spent 2 days together creating a strategic plan using our mission statement, walking together the words and ways of Jesus, and our 3 core values, intergenerational, inclusive, and in community. And we created a plan for where we want to go in the next 3 to 5 years. In the graphic, you'll see 5 bold steps. As teams have been working on them, they have each clarified and solidified their steps. Number 1, advocate for racial and housing justice. Number 2, connection groups. The purpose of these groups is to help people connect and get to know one another. They've continued to pop up around life stage, common interests, zip codes, etc. And if you're interested in learning more or about starting a group, please contact Janet Bomar. Number 3, deepen the spiritual well. We want to grow deep in our faith to support our work of justice and mercy. This will include things like the contemplative practices groups, Bible studies, small groups, prayer groups, and retreat. I'm going to jump to number 5 for a minute, sanctuary improvements. There have been some steps taken here already, including adding more cameras for our online worshipers, more microphones, and painting the front of the sanctuary. In the years to come, the task force will be working on updating and refreshing the decor and addressing ongoing technology needs. Number 4, open a fully staffed, licensed child care center. That's the one we'd like to talk with you about today. Since January, a task force has been meeting to look at the big picture of how we welcome children to the Lake Harriet Preschool, to Lake Harriet United Methodist Church Children's Ministry, and they've been identifying ministry needs for the children of our community. To do that work, we first needed to focus on the physical plant and the needs in the education wing. We hired an architect whose name was Greg Van Sickle to evaluate the education wing and determine any building upgrades necessary for our current ministry and what would be needed to add a child care center. There are some significant issues that need to be fixed and upgrades that need to be made regardless of how we use the education wing. These include updating the heating system, which dates back from when the building was built in 1962. The system is failing and needs to be replaced. There's a picture on the right of a valve that you have to hit with a hammer to get it to come on. There is no air conditioning in the education wing. With the surging temps and humidity of this week and many weeks of the year, much of the education wing is unusable. There is no air exchange. We learned during the pandemic just how important efficient air exchange is for our health. Now, these things would all have been required were we to build the same building today. There are other needs. There is asbestos in some of the rooms. Ceiling tiles need to be replaced and more. These needs and some upgrades to the church total about $300,000. The task force also explored how to expand the use of our current building to serve identified needs of our community. And Soren will address those physical plant needs in just a moment. This time I'd like to introduce Dawn Uribe, who is a member of Lake Harriet Church and the owner of many child care centers throughout the metro area. She and her husband Gary have been instrumental and an incredible resource to our team as we've looked at expanding ministry for children. Welcome, Dawn.
Good morning. I'm Dawn Uribe, and I own 4 Spanish immersion preschools and child care centers in the metro area, and we serve about 300 kids a day. So for the last 18 years, I have been devoting myself to children and their families and the teachers that work in my center. So it's my mission to serve families and kids and also provide jobs to now almost 80 employees. So there is a huge need for childcare. Childcare is so important in our community, and especially infant and toddler care. There's just not enough there are not enough spaces in the metro area, in all the country actually, to fill the need. And it's expensive. It's expensive for parents because there aren't enough spots. And it's expensive for centers because the ratios are so low. We have to have one staff for every 4 babies. And then it's also expensive because the barriers to entry are so huge. So to find a place that works, there are added expenses and requirements when you have infants and toddlers. And so in order to find existing spaces that work, or it's almost impossible. And so what you end up having to do is build brand new locations, which again is super expensive, or you try to retrofit other locations. And so I have for years been, when we first were doing preschool only, for years I searched and searched trying to find places, and ultimately we had to just do the construction ourselves. So at one of our center that's the closest to here is in Golden Valley, and there we can serve between 24 and 36 infants. But we can't add any more. So we are completely full, and the next infant opening that we have is next summer. So sometimes those parents aren't even pregnant yet, and they're like worried about where they're gonna find a space for their kids. We have 27 kids on our waiting list for infant spots. So my son attended Lake Harriet preschool for 3 years, and right after that I bought Mis Amigos, and so our family switched over, and we also started Mis Amigos at just a preschool. But there has been so many changes in the last 20 years. So now most families, they have 2 parents who are working outside of the house. And the preschool here is struggling to find enough kids. Preschools all over, if they're only serving preschool age students, they're struggling to find enough enrollments. So having infants and toddlers does a couple of things. It adds a pipeline so that you have kids who are coming into your center because they've started with you while you were young. And it also provides and then it also, right now, the preschool here is going to extend their offering to extended days and 5 days a week so that it can serve more kids, because their current model, there's just not enough families who need that kind of care. So the second thing that has happened in the last 20 years is behavioral challenges in the classroom are growing significantly. And this is something that the pandemic did not help. It made it worse. And so we're seeing more and more kids every day in our classrooms with significant behavioral issues. And there's just not enough schools that can provide the kind of support that those kids need. So we do our best to serve as many as we can, but then at some point we have to, for the safety of our own teachers and for the other kids in the classroom, we have to find a different place for them to go. And those kinds of therapeutic preschools are few and far between, and also have huge waiting lists. And so one of the hopes that we have for having a child care center at Lake Harriet is that at some point we will also be able to provide a space for those kids to be able to have a place to go, because there's just a huge need for that as well. So I will also be around and you can ask questions, but now I'm going to have Soren. He's going to talk about well, you could tell him what you're going to talk about.
Hello, my name is Soren Beinakta, and I'm a member and business administrator and facilities manager here at Lake Harriet. As Pastor Karen mentioned, currently the education wing has a few health safety issues and maintenance items that should be addressed even without childcare. In addition to those, to expand our current license to include infants and toddlers, the education wing needs direct egress outside for children under 30 months. And in order to plate food for the children, we would need to do some updates to the main kitchen, which needs to have non-porous and washable ceilings, walls, and floors. Here are a few pictures of the kitchen. It's the kitchen walls and floors. Besides being inadequate, it is also unsightly. While we do not need to or intend to replace the vent hood in the future for the kitchen to be licensed for cooking, we would need to replace it with a hood that has both makeup air and fire suppression. The following requirements and recommendations allows for the expanding of our license. Add bathrooms and relocate preschool to the upper level. Add egress doors on the lower level. Add air conditioning throughout. Add energy recovery units for makeup air throughout. Replace the kitchen floor and wall finishes and install a new ceiling and lighting in the kitchen. With those changes, the education wing can accommodate a maximum of 87 infants and toddlers on the lower level and 92 preschoolers on the upper level. From a practical standpoint, we would not have this many children, but it allows flexibility. So what would the physical education wing changes look like? For reference, here is the church building with the education wing circled in purple. The upper level would have 3 new mechanical closets, with each providing existing boiler heat and new air conditioning and fresh air through an air handler to 4 rooms each, 2 up and 2 down. The lower level, also on the upper level, every 2 rooms would share a new bathroom placed above the existing lower level bathrooms. The lower level would have an existing opening between the middle 2 rooms enlarged to allow flexibility for staffing within the infant care area, and egress doors would be added to all the rooms going out to a new sidewalk on Beard Avenue. Since the Waters Senior Living opened, we noticed that residents who enjoy going around the block are forced to walk and roll in the street because of the lack of a sidewalk. The operations team for several years has been dreaming of installing a sidewalk, and this would move that dream forward as well. So, what would all of this cost? The changes in the education wing and kitchen, less the vent hood, are estimated to cost $674,000. Throw in approximately $117,000 in contingency costs, because we all know how construction projects go, and we would have a total of $792,000. This includes the approximate $300,000 that we should be doing regardless. So how do we make this vision a reality? I'd like to introduce operations team member Brandy Edmonds, who will speak about making this vision a reality.
Thanks, Soren. Hello, I'm Brandy Edmonds, and I get to walk you through how we propose to fund this exciting initiative. So as we talked about, we need to secure roughly $800,000 in funding, and I'm happy to report that we've identified a way to do that with internal funding at almost 2/3 of the project cost. So a request will be made to the Lake Harriet Foundation for $295,000 for past underutilized repair and maintenance funds. So in recent years, the foundation has designated up to about $80,000 a year for repair and maintenance, but we haven't spent all of that. And so we'll ask for that $115,000 that has been unused, and we request an additional $70,000 for repairs and maintenance projected over the next 2 years. So between grants, dedicated accounts, and these underutilized funds, we have about $400,000 to put towards the project. Additionally, we filed for tax credits that will bring in another $150,000 that we can use towards this project. And then we're recommending a 3-year capital campaign at $300,000. That's roughly $100,000 over a 3-year time period. And we believe that this capital campaign is really important, that we self-fund and bring this vision to life, because it will bring immediate revenue back to the church in the first year of the child care operation, and I'll show you that here in a minute. All right, so this next slide has a ton of details, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but I just have you look at the bottom line. And so this is our vision fully brought to life. A child care center that is thriving and full to capacity. And in this scenario, the church is receiving revenue the first year of its operation. And over a 10-year period, we would have accumulated revenue of over $4 million. Imagine how this can secure and shape the future ministry of this church. All right, this next slide is just to show that even at 80% capacity, we are still bringing in revenue in year 1 through that self-funding through the capital campaign, and continue to bring in important revenue through the church. The operations committee has looked through the financial assumptions and feel very confident in this proposal and the capital campaign recommendation that we are bringing forward. So I'll quickly go through next steps. Today, we're sharing with you our intention to start this capital campaign. We need to hire a construction company. We need to hire a childcare director to start preparations. And we will continue to socialize this plan and answer all of your questions in the coming weeks. We want to hold a church conference on September 24th to vote on this plan and start a capital campaign immediately after. What does this mean next? Well, we'd start construction here in winter of 2024, and our goal would be to open the Child Care Center in September of 2024 for the next kind of school year. And so I'm going to ask Hillary to come up and share her thoughts on this vision and the future of the church. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Hillary Dorsey, and I've been a member of Lake Harriet for over 50 years. I can hardly believe it. The sanctuary in which we are gathered together today was built in 1953, with the administration and education building soon following. A Star and Tribune article about our new church in 1953 stated it was newer than new. Fast forward to 2000, the buildings were showing their age, and the congregation made a huge commitment of stewardship to bring our buildings into the 21st century. If you had attended Lake Harriet before 2002, you would be facing the back of the sanctuary. All the windows were single pane, aluminum frame, and very inefficient. The commons area was anything but spacious or welcoming. The bathrooms were not accessible by wheelchair or even a walker. Here is a list of some of the most items this congregation has addressed since 2000. The sanctuary, including the lighting and the sound, the commons area, and the newer accessible bathrooms. New bathrooms and a shower were installed off of Fellowship Hall, and that welcomes other groups to come in and share our space, like the church in Indiana for our ASP. All the windows and exterior doors have been replaced and are now double-paned with a UV tint. Rooftop air conditioning units were installed to cool the sanctuary, the fellowship hall, reception room, and the offices. The sanctuary roof, we found, was not insulated. It is now. White membrane roofs were installed on the administration building and the reception and common areas. Solar panels were installed on the education building with a surprising positive return almost immediately. We installed an education wing elevator. Some things were necessary, but not very exciting. Asbestos tile removal and recent repair of the pilings under the administration building are to name two. Over and over again, I am very happy to be associated with a congregation that preaches mission and stewardship of our church home, our community, and our planet. We are now in a good position to pursue another stewardship and ministry opportunity. The upgrade approval requested for the education wing and the kitchen, in my view, is not only necessary, but in keeping with our long-standing values of this church. I'm reminded of Lorraine and Roger Frank. Many of you may not even know those names. They put a second mortgage on their house to finance their pledge to build the education wing. They, like so many others at Lake Harriet, were committed. You've already heard about the education wing, and I'll add my bit about the main kitchen. The kitchen has not been upgraded since the flooding of 1987. Compliance issues that need be addressed just for sanitary plating of food would be the installation of a suspended ceiling, sanitary wall services, and new flooring. These changes would also be appreciated by the whole church community for any gathering involving food. I recall the words of our wonderful and late friend Warren Spanis from over 20 years ago. I remember him saying before we initiated the first capital campaign, "If you're not invested in the future, you're dying." And this congregation has shown it has been and will continue to be invested in the future. Thank you.